applaud your tenacity. Again, it gives me a lot of pleasure to welcome Rob and to bring him here to help us have conversations about things that we all care about, and that's really just looking at how are we doing as an institution and how are our students doing. So again, welcome back to Eugene.
Thank you.
And welcome back to Lane. Did you happen to peek out the window and see snow about an hour ago?
I did. I think I told a couple of you people. I'll tell the little story about my snow Eugene story. But yeah, it's been great.
Very good. Well, Rob, I'm sure I'll get to introduce you again tomorrow, but
here we go.
Here you are again.
A lot of familiar faces out here. I'll do the Cliff Notes version for those of you who haven't had the luxury or penalty of being with me all day. My name is Rob Johnstone, founder and president of the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement. I've run this group, NCII. I started about 6 years ago to work with colleges around the country. I come from the California Community College system, where I was a researcher and then the vice president of instruction. Have had the good fortune to work on a large number of national projects in the guided pathways and the student financial stability space, as well as the Aspen Prize. I'm a 1996 University of Oregon doctoral program graduate in social psychology. So this is, in a way, a homecoming for me. It looks a little different, but maybe not as different as a lot of places would from 1996 to the last couple of years. That's what I love about Eugene. It's got some of the new, but the history. Rennie's is still there, right? Is it still there? Yeah, it's still there. You may be finding me there later, although there's a lot of great brewery options here now, too. It is very cool to be here. And I thank to so many of you who've stuck through this throughout the day. You guys know how to get a full day out of somebody. Man, I tell you, I've had like 3 minutes in between 5 sessions. And so in this session, we're going to talk a little more about the framework of guided pathways. We're going to take a look at some of the key transformations. What I really want to do for most of the content part of this session is just show you examples from other colleges who've gone down this path before you. None of them are done, by the way. None of them are perfect. The story of guided pathways is going to be a multi-year. I mean, the Georgia State's the one that's probably been at this the longest. It's a 15, 16-year story, and they're still learning. I mean, the Valencias of the world are still learning from what they're doing. The early guided pathways colleges in the community college space are still learning as well. But there's a lot to learn from these examples. And then we're going to turn it over to you and let you. Now, I've had some of you in topic-based sessions today. We'll have tomorrow. We had a session this morning on the role of liberal arts and humanities in guided pathways, which I thought was a fascinating conversation. Talked with some faculty at lunch about some of their concerns and hopes for this movement at Lane. And then just came out of a discussion, I kind of morphed a discussion from learning outcomes into teaching and learning and the evolution of teaching and learning at Lane, either under a guided pathways model or in general. More great conversation, and thanks to all of you who have made those conversations interesting by providing all the kind of questions and the thought capital for it. But I will also show you a set of more general questions. I'll tell you what Guided Pathways Demystified is, and then don't worry about that. Again, a lot of this content, especially the examples our friends at CCRC put together, I always give them a lot of credit because they have their thumb on the pulse of this work around the country in higher education. They do it from a place of trying to help community colleges, not be judgmental about them, which again, as I may have mentioned this morning, is not always the case from external organizations like this. And I've had the great good fortune of having a large number of partners working on this with me as well. But I kind of ended with this morning. This morning we talked about, I don't want to lose that thread, and we kind of talked about a little in the kind of topic-based sessions, is that we have hopefully, a strong sense of urgency from the missions of social justice or the missions of equity, the missions of economic mobility, an educated citizenry, a trained workforce. However you come at this, what brings you to work every day, in addition to your love of what you do, is that you care about students' lives, about the lives of students in your communities. And we also talked this morning, I did this online poll, so you remember, about you believe you have agency in being able to affect the institutional conditions and structures and culture so that more students will succeed. At the end of the day, that's the stuff that's going to matter the most. And then you get to try to decide, how do you proceed on this journey? This is learning what we've learned from a lot of research in behavioral economics and social psychology about choice, about architecting choice, learning from students about what they struggle with and what they're looking for. We've kind of came to, over a period of time, that this model we're talking about, and this is not, by the way, I joked about color-coded charts earlier. This is color-coded by section, but it's not a how-to guide. On the right, you have the 4 big ideas of guided pathways. Clarifying the paths for students so they know what they need to take to get to where they want to go. All right, that's cool. Where do they want to go? What do they want to do? We got to help them get on that path. right? That doesn't happen accidentally, we've learned over time, right? How do we keep them on the path? Life intervenes, right? Students change their minds. They fail a course. Things get complicated in their lives outside of the classroom. How do we help them stay on the path? How do we make it so that they don't have to be heroic to succeed here? How do we make it so that they have the social capital and the structure and support and a safety net if something goes wrong? Like, how do we build that in so it's not an accident that someone finds those things? We just came out of this section, ensuring they're learning. You can do all of the first three, but if students aren't learning what we say what they're learning, or we want them to learn, it all falls through the cracks. We can set up the best structures in the world. Those are the four big ideas. On the left side, on the planning side, it's just something, and by the way, this graphic comes out of the AACC Pathways Project. I didn't do a lot of the history of the Pathways movement, but 2011 completion by design, based on a lot of research from CCRC, Davis Jenkins and his paper Get With The Program, which interestingly showed that if you took 3 courses from a program area in your first year, your chance of completing community college went up like 30 points versus those who didn't. So those who didn't have a focus in their first year, 30-point lower completion rates than those who did. That was one thing that came out of the research. Another thing came out of a lot of focus groups that Judith Scott Clayton and others did a paper called The Shapeless River, which was a really powerful analogy for how students struggled in higher education. Her visual was, I've talked to a lot of these students, and I had to come up with a visual of how they struggle. And to her, it was like being in a canoe on a winding river in a jungle at night, surrounded by trees, with no light on the boat and no moon. You are almost guaranteed at some point to run aground, and once you do, it's really hard to find your way back to the path and to know where you're going. That's a powerful visual, right? That's out of decades of kind of looking at student experiences. That all kind of comes around. And then in 2011, we started Completion by Design, which was 9 colleges in 3 states as we were trying to figure this out as we started. 2013, AACC comes along, the American Association of Community Colleges, with their 21st Century Learning Commission report, which basically says, hey, community colleges, you've been doing as good a job as you can with limited resources and an 800-year-old model. But if we want to optimize how many students get through our institutions to their goals, we're going to have to evolve. That was a big step, by the way, that your national organization, AACC, your trade organization in DC, was saying, we're doing a great job with the old model, but the old model isn't going to be enough. And we're going to rethink the way students enter and move through our institutions. Big deal. AACC Pathways Project comes along in 2015. 30 colleges nationally apply, actually nearly 200 colleges apply to be part of a program where you got no money from the foundation, Gates Foundation. Completion by Design, the colleges got their share of $60 million. AACC Pathways, 4 years later, here's the value proposition was, you're going to come to a series of 6 institutes, over 6 2.5-day institutes spread out around the country over a 2.5-year period. You're going to agree to implement guided pathways at scale for all entering students who need them by fall of 2018 for the first cohort. So a 3-year development cycle. You're going to come with a team of 5 to 7 people to each of these 6 institutes in 6 different states. Your president's going to come to all of those, and if she doesn't or he doesn't, Kay McClunny will call them and find them and hunt them down, and you don't want that. And then you're going to actually agree to pay for it all on your own. No money from the foundation. The money from the foundation went to running these things and actually some of the food and beverage stuff at the institutes. But it wasn't cheap for colleges to be a part of this. When we opened up this project for applications in 2015, I again pointed out to my peers, like, you realize on top of all that, you created the most Byzantine, complicated application to fill out that requires the most work in a short period of time and asks people to talk about how they've scaled change in their history. Right? This is a hard application. It was like an accreditation application. I thought we'd get no applicants. Turned out I was wrong. We got nearly 200. Right? Well over 100 and short of 200, which means that we were on to something. Colleges were ready to take that step of trying to rethink the student experience, and we ended up picking 30 from 17 states, including one of yours up the road here at Lynn Benton in Oregon, who hasn't solved all their problems. By the way, they know more than most that the first semester you roll out guided pathways at scale is when you start learning, not when you're done. They did it in fall of 18. They're just now learning. I was talking to some folks there through the grapevine about their experience in the first semester of doing this at scale. That's when you start learning. We told people you need a version 1.0 mentality on this, right? You're not done when you roll this out. You're starting, right? And so to do all of that, you need the things on the left side. One, large-scale transformation requires strong leadership. You guys have a new cadre of leaders. And I don't mean leaders only at the front of the room, at the top of the organization. You need that. You need leadership throughout the organization. Faculty, student services, middle management, all being aligned towards this idea that we're going to work towards these 4 big ideas together and not just point to the other group. You need to be able to commit to using data over time. I asked earlier, how do you know? We showed some of the data from Lane. It's kind of as a foundation. The good news is you've started some early movement on those key performance indicators. That's a great start, right? If you really want to move the needle on completion and post-graduation success, you got to take the next couple of steps. You got to understand where you are and prepare for change. You need to be realistic about how does your unique story get you to today in February of 2019, and that'll help determine how you're going to move forward. And then finally, you got to commit to this for the long term. This may be the most important thing on here, is that this is not something I joked about this last hour. You know how this goes. You get a grant. You either reassign 1 or 2 people to run the grant. You put them in a trailer at the back of campus and say, you're the guided pathways people. And the rest of us go back to doing things the same way we always did them and hope that the guided pathways people fill out the grant, but it doesn't change anything. That cannot be your mentality when you go into guided pathways, right? You have to commit to the long term from the top, and you have to commit together that we don't have all the answers. Here's the good news and the bad news. A lot of people would love it if I could just say, here's the 9 things you do. Do them in this order, spend this long designing this, have it look like this, you'll get 30 points of better outcomes. It doesn't work that way. Here's the good news about that, is you get to design it. This is not an implementation process, it's a design process. These are 4 big ideas. Every college is on its own unique trajectory, and you get to figure out what's Lane's approach going to be to this. Not what Foothill's approach or Lynn Benton's approach or anyone else is going to be. What's Lane's approach, right? What is it you know about your students that makes your trajectory a little bit different than maybe some other colleges, although I do believe the problems are largely the same. You got the early outcomes, some evaluation. We kind of talked about the KPIs earlier. So those 4 big ideas, though, that's where we're going to kind of go next. And so here are some of the transitions. I showed this slide last year, but I'm going to show you examples now as a result of this. Here are kind of, you think about kind of clarifying the paths. Here's the big transitions, right? How did people pick a program before? You got a long list of programs in your catalog. I know you do, because we all do, right? You list all 150. How many programs total, you know? 150, 230? Somebody? A lot. More than 5, less than 500. But you have a lot of programs, right? My guess is you have like 150, right? And by the way, no one has ever once looked at your catalog, listing your programs, and thought this helps them make a choice, right? It's just a list. I joked at some point earlier that, that's why accounting is such one of the most popular majors, because it's first. I say this as a son of an accountant, right? But maybe there's a way to architect that choice process. So rather than coming in and saying, hey, students, go take some courses and let us know what you want to do, right? Pick from this list of programs. Maybe there's a way to change that initial experience that when students come in, they actually get an experience that helps them make that choice. I like, this has unfortunately been called meta majors, this notion of call them academic career communities, call them focus areas. One of the colleges in California, this may be my favorite word I've heard to call their meta majors, they call them trailheads. This is the trailhead to your path, right? So this is the idea that you're going to do some things here that help you pick the right trail. Kind of a cool idea. I like that idea. We've got a lot of a la carte courses. Pick 1 from this list of 7. Pick 2 from this list of 62, right? I know how gen ed packages work. I'll show you an example. I think I have a before and after on this. Well, maybe we can start with some program maps that actually identify course sequences, critical courses, and co-curricular requirements. Not just the classroom stuff. You'll see from these examples. What do we suggest students do outside the classroom, right? And again, one quick thing on the program maps. These are the default program maps. The program maps are not the end. They're a point of departure for every student to have an individualized plan. Algebra is the default math path. I know you guys have done some work on this already, to the idea that there are program and field-specific math paths. I told some people in one of the earlier sessions, I taught Psych 301, I'm pretty sure that was the number of the course, at U of O in 1993 to 1996. It was statistics for the social sciences. If you were a social science major at U of O, the flagship university in your state, that was your math course. You didn't take algebra, you took statistics for the social sciences. Having taught that course, although I do understand the math behind statistics, it wasn't a math statistics course. It was a social science applied statistics course. We taught about how do you apply, what statistics would you apply in certain situations. That was your math course at U. It's still there, by the way, same requirement. Right? We put more requirements on our students sometimes than the flagships do. We had someone, I don't remember who it was from South Carolina. I mean, I don't know if that person is here now, but one of your people came from South Carolina. That's an interesting place because their flagship, the University of South Carolina, Columbia, there's 7 ways you can satisfy the math requirement, and 4 of them are computer programming courses. Why? Because they're saying this is about our computational and analytical skill set. Maybe it's not just about algebra. Maybe it's a wide range of ways we could do that. By the way, these days, my 1993 mind never thought about alternate math pathways. I thought it was interesting that that was the math course. But if you're going to major, if you're going to go on to, say, graduate school in psychology, and you ask me what's the right math course, I actually need to ask you some questions still. Because if you're going, as they have a great lab here, into cognitive or neuropsych, you absolutely need the algebra to calculus sequence. But if you're in developmental, behavioral, social, you probably need statistics, right? It's that mindset of the math class isn't a math class isn't a math class. And by the way, those math people in the room know that algebra only exists on the pathway as where we have it to help prepare people for calculus, right? How many of our students need calculus? Well, not that many. 20%, let's make sure they take it. Historically, by the way, what do we do with math pathways? We default everyone, oh, we want to keep everyone's doors open, so let's get everyone into the algebra sequence. Well, historically, that was, by the way, not a great thing for outcomes for students, right? That's the sequence that's the hardest to get through. So we want to open minds and open doors, but the idea here is what's the right math path to program specific skill path. Wow, that didn't come out. That was like the end of the day, 5th meeting. Certificates versus degrees. Wow, we have so many false dichotomies in higher education. Student services versus instruction. Administration versus faculty. And how about career technical versus transfer? Right? We all hear CTE programs, you're the ones caring about careers over there. And by the way, sometimes this is when it gets really kind of pejorative. Career technical people over here, the academic people, you're over here. Oh, that's awesome. So all these people over here working on real-life applied skill sets like welding in the real world, like that's not academic. Arc welding isn't an academic exercise in the real world. Not only is it academic, I hope they do it right so that roof stays up. The stakes are higher there, by the way, but that's a very academic exercise. And this notion of like we've got some students who are transferring, some students who want a career, they all want a career, right? So this idea of where do certificates and degrees, well, how about pathways that have embedded certificates or certifications, like real career ladders over time? And I don't mean give someone a certificate for completing 1/4 of a psychology degree, which means absolutely nothing, right? I can't take my certificate for completing 1/4 of an A in psychology to an employer and say, look, I've completed 1/4 of an A in psychology. The employer would laugh, right? That doesn't mean anything. But what we do mean is there are opportunities in certain areas to build true embedded certifications that have market value. More the case in computer science, or more the case in logistics, or culinary, or human services, but we can do that. Connections to transfer and career unclear. How about we actually get much more clear about this? I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm fairly sure that 80% of your students transfer to U of O or Oregon State. Maybe it's 70, maybe it's 68. It's high. So if we know where most of the transfer students are going, and I know you guys are now working on the state policy on transfer because someone told me about it earlier, which is great, by the way. As you're working on that, you still know there are differences between transferring to OSU or UO depending on your department. Why don't we start from there, though, and actually work backwards so we can make these connections more clear for students? And the same with career opportunities. Like, are my career services people still in here? Where'd they go? They gone? Yeah, your career services? Cool. When do you, how many students do you meet with, like a year? Like if you were to add it all up, what do you think that number is? All right, so call it 700, 800, if you will. How many students are at Lane? 10,000. So even just there alone, we're talking 7-8% of students are getting, I mean, you're not the only person, but maybe you are the only person, but that would be the case at a lot of colleges. This idea of where do students learn about careers, well, we teach a course. Every college has that course. And at every college, that course is 200, like 300 to 400 is a lot, by the way. A lot of colleges, that's 60 students a year, 2 sections, one in the fall, one in the spring. And that's how many students get career exploration. Unless they like seek it out on their own, which we know in many cases doesn't serve the students we want to serve, right? And I like the idea of it being a career planning class because are people taking that earlier or later in their trajectory at the college?
They're all over the place. Some are first term and
Some are in their last term, right, where it's way too late. Like, by the way, what did I just work on for I'm still here. I've been here for 7 quarters. Now I might want to think about how this translates. Like, so the point is, it's not her fault, right? How do we actually take the idea of onboarding and building career exploration earlier? Maybe make it mandatory and built into the process so that students see connections. And by the way, they see connections in their coursework to where they're going with transfer or career. These are all kind of the ideas of rethinking mapping programs. The big transitions of onboarding. We just talked about one of them, job or transfer support for near completers. We do a great job with this, by the way. You come to us in the last semester, we'll tell you all you want to know about career exploration or actually is that course going to transfer. The problem is it's too late in many cases, especially on the transfer side. Yeah, that's interesting that you've taken those 20 courses, but guess what? 30 courses, quarters. Interesting that you took those 30. Only 23 of them are going to transfer to U of O. Students aren't happy. Now, luckily for us, they often find that out after they've left us, right? So they find that out when they're there. They're pissed still, but they got to come back and find us to be pissed, right? Which they're much more pissed than you think they are about that. Because in your case, it's only a mile away, so you probably see more. It's easier to come back over here and be mad than it would be if they were at Portland. But they're not happy about this, right? You are the lower cost alternative to the flagship next door to OSU. And if they're repeating courses there, not only did they lose financial aid eligibility, they're repeating it where it's more expensive, right? It's a big deal. Our goal isn't transfer, it's transfer with junior standing in a major. How about the idea of career and college exploration and planning for all from the start? Not to lock you in. Not to lock you in, but to get you on a path with momentum so you can make informed decisions. I said this earlier today, I'll say it again. I'm very happy if someone changes their mind in the first quarter or the second quarter. That's the best possible outcome to change your mind. You change it in your 9th quarter, you got a problem. And that is probably half of what you've done. You're still here after 9 quarters, which is amazing. Half of what you've done doesn't transfer to whatever you just decided to change to. How do we move that earlier? If people are going to change their minds, let's help them actually do that earlier rather than later. Man, how about a current semester schedule? Man, nothing students hate more than you're changing when the courses are offered every semester, quarters for you guys. You have more chance to screw this up. What about the idea of a full program plan, right? This is 2 things. This is scheduling. This is also the kind of 1 quarter window. Like, what's your next quarter of courses, which isn't the worst situation in the world if your students are meeting with advisors every quarter to help determine what they should take next quarter. Then, advisors can kind of navigate this, right? If you got someone who came to you all these times, you could navigate it with them and figure out what are the next 4 classes you need to take, or 2 classes if they're part-time. The problem is we don't see many of those students, right? They're not coming back to us. They're not required to. The ones who most need us don't come. Like, you're confirming people who are already going to be successful. Yes, you will be successful if you do that, right? Or you have the ones who are very challenged. This is a big deal. By the way, this can translate into scheduling. We'll talk about schedule in a second. We do a lot of academic assessment, right? My favorite thing about this historically, and this is changing, I know. Students come to us. They're already worried about there being college material, many of them, right? Wonder if I'm college material. Wonder if college is for me. It's the first thing we do to them. Test them in the 2 subjects they hated most in high school, English and math, and tell most of them that confirmed beyond a reasonable doubt, we also think you're unworthy of college until you do all these courses. We too don't think you're college material. Right? Now, we don't say it quite that way, but the net message to students who are already worried if they're college material is, I'm not college material. I'm not saying we can go 180 degrees in the other, although, by the way, the colleges have gone 180 degrees in the other direction. They have better outcomes. Like, I think a middle ground is probably somewhere to get to. But this idea, and how about holistic assessment? You guys heard me this morning, the Harvard story, right? Harvard spends a week onboarding students on a mandatory orientation before they start their first semester of classes. Right? They need to be Harvard knows their students are not prepared for higher education. They need to acculturate them and create a bridge to the institution. Our students, some of whom are, by the way, could be fine at Harvard, but most of our students don't have that experience of academic excellence and navigating educational systems, and we do 10 times less for our students in terms of onboarding and getting them ready for college. Right? That's backwards. Right? Some places that have done summer bridge programs, by the way, they're very expensive. They've experienced high levels of success. Why? Because you're creating a bridge to the institution, right? Florida State, actually, someone was from Florida State earlier, too. Florida State is an interesting place because they've had this program they developed in the last 4 or 5 years where they, I never would have guessed this, but Florida State is not a very diverse school overall. And they were trying to increase their diversity. And so they actually created programs with some of the local high schools that were in lower economically disadvantaged areas, which were disproportionately students of color, even in the greater kind of Tallahassee area. What they did is they actually took students whose average GPA was 0.3 lower than their regular entrance requirements, but they created a summer bridge for them and made them kind of within a kind of 4-week boot camp idea. They worked on some math and English stuff, but they worked on acculturation and getting them as a bridge to the institution, and those students succeed at the same rates as their average entering student. Right? So you have to do something different, and I think the point here is that some of those things are on the non-cognitive side. Miami-Dade, also in Florida. In the first year of completion by design, not only did they restructure their programs, did they make orientation mandatory, did they make advising mandatory, there's a mandatory non-cognitive skills assessment that every student takes that's fed to the advisor in the first session. And then they use it to try to start that process of what are the kind of the non-cognitive factors. A couple colleges in California are working on this as well. We talked about prereq versus co-req. Lots of data on this nationally. I know it's getting a lot of attention. Algebra and English comp to critical program courses. What's the transition here? We talk about it as if the only 2 hard courses on your campus are English 1A and intermediate algebra. There's a hard course in every program. I'm guaranteeing you faculty from programs could tell me what the course in your program that's not these 2 courses is, that is that gatekeeper to success. Students who get an A or B in that course do really well. The ones who don't struggle. Well, why don't we identify those courses? I mean, Santa Barbara is one of my favorite examples of this. Like limited resources for student services, they have this gateway tutoring program. Where's the gateway tutoring program targeting? Yeah, it does math and English, but it also targets the hardest area in each program. You guys have it had it in the catalog. I know you're not there anymore, Paul. I'm pointing at you, but like you had it in the catalog with like a section had a G by it, right? Yeah. And so part of the idea there is students know this is a critical course, and they also know I'm going to have supplemental instruction support to actually support how hard that course is to help me get through this milestone course. And by the way, I think it was I remember from the Aspen, like $300,000 a year to run that, maybe.
Yeah, we spent a little bit more, about $400,000 a year.
But
we added courses, first in sequence.
First in sequence courses. So if you have limited resources, why not dedicate them where you know people are either starting or they're at the hardest course in the sequence? I love that idea of dedicating limited resources. The point, this is a Davis Jenkins point, like algebra and English comp are not the only 2 courses that matter. And it's not just A&P for nursing students. There's one, I don't know what it is in econ, but there's one course that will predict success somewhere early in that program. Let's focus the resources there. Our friend dual credit, right? I think Malloy told me like 40% of your students come with some form of high school dual credit already. So I don't do this rant as well as Davis does, but one of the things dual credit's done in this country is it's bolstered, enrollment drops. And it's become a very big factor at a lot of colleges in this country. There are colleges who have 30 to 50% of their enrollment in dual credit. The one problem with that, by the way, the coming storm, is that's one legislative stroke away from being gone. When and by the way, I'm not one of these legislators, but when they say, aren't we double paying for this? What are we getting out of the fact we're paying both the community colleges and the high school for this? It's been threatened to happen in Texas, which would be horrible for Texas because it's a huge thing there. I think part of our story about dual credit and the other question about dual credit is, who is it serving? Is it serving the top 20% well-off white rich students and giving them earlier access to college credits? Or is it serving the students in your community who have less access to higher education historically? If you're not careful with this, it gets to the former very quickly and at the expense of the latter. And is it with a purpose is the final question. This notion of how do you create in high schools, not tracking, but momentum, right? This idea of the cafeteria model we talk a lot about, like we don't want to have students randomly taking courses for long periods of time not knowing where they're going. Most dual credit programs just take that chaos and throw it to the high schools, where there's less advising, right? They're less connected to the programs. So these are kind of some of the onboarding as we think about the right side of this. How do we get career and college exploration there? The notion of a full program plan. And then on the advising front, talking about advising. This is a kind of a keeping students on the path. Man, when we do mandatory orientation, how long is your mandatory orientation? Is it mandatory? Ish? Yes, it is. Yes. By the way, there's an interesting observation there that I get a lot at colleges. When I ask if something is mandatory, I get 1/3 yes, 1/3 no, 1/3 I don't know, which does suggest, it's not you, by the way, it's all over the place. So how long's the orientation? 2 hours. So here's what we know about human learning, by the way. Like, one-shot things don't work that well. They have to be supported over time. And one thing we absolutely know, this is more in my field of social and cognitive psychology, if you tell human beings, because students still remain human, we sometimes like despecies them into some other thing, like we're the rational people, we're the rational decision makers, right? Students are the ones who are irrational. Like, we're the same people, by the way. If you put us in a room, for example, I don't know, at new faculty orientation, and you tell us, here's the things I want you to think about for the next 5 years, and if this thing goes wrong in year 3, I want you to talk to Bob in office 422. We don't do very well with that, right? Why would we assume that our students, who are less tuned to higher education, and we kind of fire hose them? By the way, this doesn't mean mandatory orientation is bad. What it means is it has to be step one of a longer support model where you're giving people just-in-time support for major decisions along the path. I did some work in Texas with my cohort, one of my cohort colleges. I had these students I always do student focus groups because it gives you like a sense. There's there's the college we think that students experience, and then there's the one they actually experience, and those are two completely different things at most colleges. I had these students in a room. This is at a college that I won't name the college, had mandatory orientation. And I had this student, and I didn't actually have to do much. I just asked, hey, I hear you guys have mandatory orientation. Before I finished that phrase, she started cursing. And she said, that effing mandatory orientation. I had to get a babysitter for my daughter and pay $50 I didn't have to come to an orientation that for 3.5 or 4 hours told me things I didn't need to know right now, but I might need to know later. Maybe you should tell me how to navigate your bad technology systems that I have to now navigate to enroll. Maybe you should help me make the decisions I need to make now. Tell me the stuff I need to do later. I typed every word of that down. Like, she could not have made a more compelling case. Again, she wasn't saying, I don't want to come to mandatory orientation. She was saying, have this help me know what I need to do now. Have it be the basis for what I need to do now. To me and to those of us in the field, that means you got to do this now and maybe in the next advising session. This is why I think the notion of mandatory/case management advising, or at least mandatory check-in advising, is so important. The things they're going to need to know in quarter 5, you can't do in quarter 1 or pre-quarter 1. And if you don't know that they're going to see them in quarter 5, you got a problem. By the way, it may not have to be every quarter. It could be at unit check-ins, 15, 30, 40, whatever it is. You can think of all kinds of ways of doing this. But this idea is we need to have just-in-time support. My favorite, scheduling. So I would strongly suggest you don't take on scheduling first, because it's like one of those third rails in any community college. You just grab onto it, feel the electricity course through your veins. Why? Well, that's because we all know how you've scheduled historically. Where are my deans in the room? My deans, I don't want to make eye contact. They're like, don't ask me this now. I'm not going to say it. I'll do it for you. I'll be the dean. So what is the number one problem that I'm trying to solve as a dean when I schedule next fall's social science curriculum? This is the brutal honesty phase of the afternoon. I want to know when faculty want to teach and when I can make the most faculty happy with their teaching schedules, teaching courses they want to teach at the times they want to teach them. Now, I am not judgmental about that, because you just described scheduling for the last 50 years in higher education, right? Now, that's scheduling to meet our purposes. If the question we're actually trying to do is, hey, what courses do students need to take to get to where they want to go, and when should we offer them so they can take them together? That's a whole different scheduling model. By the way, I would not take this on tomorrow. Don't start here. You'll get there, right? But it's an entirely different question, right? I know how this worked. I mean, the dean talks to me, and I say, I see Paul over there. He wants to teach at 11 this quarter instead of 9, and Jennifer was that. So we switch them, right? One was a history course, one was a sociology course. That sounds great, but you could have just taken the ability for a student to get a full schedule of courses they needed and gotten rid of that with that scheduling switch. Not judgmental about our history on this, by the way, but if we're going to schedule to actually when students need them, you can't schedule every student's unique preference. If a student comes, you say, you know what I really need is Monday from 10 to 1, Tuesday from 5 to 8, Wednesday from 3. I mean, there's got to be like logic and reason in this. But when you know many of your students need courses, and do they fit together? You know, scheduling always happens within departments, right? When was the last time one of your departments talked to another department to figure out if your schedule matches theirs for students you know need both courses? I mean, if you've done that, congratulations, you're very unique, right? But when you go down this path, if you're going to tell students, we're going to create paths for you that optimize scheduling. This, by the way, is one of the answers to the question, if you're telling me every student has an individualized plan, why should I map the programs? There's about 10 answers to this question. By the way, one of them is scheduling. Because if you have an optimal sequence of courses to finish the program, right, you can schedule those. And if a student's going to substitute art history for music theory, you can't guarantee them you'll be able to do that because you didn't schedule for that being the course. If they're okay with that, fine. If it works for them, great. But there is this question of, when you're getting to individualized plans, why scheduling may be different. Full-time versus part-time. We always talk about this. How many of our students are full-time? By the way, those of you who were earlier, it was made a point to me after I should have clarified. My statement that 65% of your students are full-time is true with the denominator being first time ever in college students. When students come to you for the first time, 65% of them are full-time. If you look in the aggregate, and those are fall starters, by the way, as well. So if they come to you in the winter or spring, or they've had previous college experience, they're not in that denominator. And those students are much more part-time. So on the aggregate, your students are probably closer to half or less than half full-time. You get more courses taken, by the way, of course, from the full-timers as well. So just a clarification. How about the idea of being on-plan versus off-plan? Right? So, by the way, if our students are going to be part-time, wow, the whole guided pathways thing matters more to them, not less. If it takes, excuse me, 30 courses to graduate from here or transfer, and I can only take 2 a quarter, I'm no mathematician, but if I take the right courses and pass all of them, that's 15 quarters. What if half the courses I take are wrong? I'm never getting out of here. And by the way, if you look at the research, that's exactly what you find. Like, there's this assumption we made historically, by the way, which is it's okay that students are part-time. They just finish later. Hey, that's an interesting hypothesis. Well, one thing to know about what happens if they take longer to finish is that their marketplace value, they never regain the time lost by not having the next educational level. So if it takes 10 years to get your AA, and it could have taken 3, you don't get those 7 back. Those are 7 years of your life at, on average, a lower income level. It's not perfect, we understand. That's one reason part-time versus full-time matters. But another is that hypothesis is completely untrue. It isn't the case that part-time students eventually all finish, or finish at the same rates as full-time students. If you look at the data, you'll see success rates with your full-time students close to 50%. And if you go out 10 years with students who never take one full term, if they're always part-time, your success rate hovers between 10 and 12%, 15% possibly. There's a big difference here. Now, having said that, not all students have the financial stability to go full-time. Don't have time for this rant, maybe we'll do it tomorrow. I think we have more control over whether students are full-time or part-time than we take credit for. With a value proposition, with scheduling, right? Scheduling is one big reason some of your students, we get this all the back. I would have taken more courses, but the course I need is offered at the time of the other course they told me to take, right? And the other thing about scheduling, and maybe is this coming up here? Huh, I thought I had this on here, or Davis did. The other thing about scheduling is, why do we change scheduling quarter by quarter? Like, if you tell me I need to come this quarter, Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 10 to 2, and I arrange my work schedule to do that, and next quarter you're telling me I need to come Tuesday, Thursday from 1 to 6, I don't know about your students, but if I had students working part-time to full-time, they're not in jobs where they can tell their boss they need to switch their hours, right? They're in lower level, they're in jobs where they're gonna have to go with what hours they can get. If you keep changing constantly, and again, this is one of the things, as I said earlier, quarters can be better for some things, they're more challenging for others. This is one of those challenges. You have more chances to change your student schedule of when the courses are. And they're trying to fit that into a work life. That's another reason a lot of them are full-time. Either way, the idea should be, are they on their plan or off their plan? If I can only take 9 units a quarter, what's my plan to finish? What's my quickest plan to finish? Am I sticking with that plan, or how do I revise that plan? If I'm off plan, how do I get back on? Advising versus teaching, this is another one of those false dichotomies. Like, we gotta stop pretending that advisors don't teach and that faculty don't advise. Whether it's formal or informal, on both sides, by the way. Yeah, I mean, you're a career counselor, is that the title? And you teach courses, so you're already teaching a course. Faculty member, right? Advisors are also advising people in advising sessions. That is also teaching. By the way, faculty, whether you're formal or not, you're advising students. Not all the time, maybe. I mean, there's reasons for this too. I mean, if I'm a classic student services counselor or advisor, I may be faculty, but I don't know what the difference is between being a forensic accountant or an actuary. I'm going to need my econ professor to actually talk to students about what that difference is. If that difference is important to a student, I can't help them figure that out. Faculty know that. It's also likely, possible, but less likely, that the student services, classic, what we would call student services advising, aren't going to know a lot of the nuances between which program in a given discipline at which four-year institution works best for what you're interested in. Yeah, they've all got music, but which is the right type of music program in a four-year school for you? You need faculty for that, right? Because faculty are the ones who are more likely to know that. So the point here is we need to work together on this, right? Finally, on the teaching and learning side, then we'll start showing the examples. We talk a lot about these classic gen ed learning outcomes. Maybe we can start doing this by these meta majors or those career communities. How about generic gen eds versus contextual gen eds? We just came out of a session where I told you about the college in Ohio, Lorain County, who started offering English 1A in 6 different versions by meta major. Same course outline, but maybe we can contextualize it so the students who are in business get an English 1A that's more tailored to business writing and business kind of readings. Same with health science, same with natural science. There's another reason you can't do that, right? I mean, the algebra pathway, the math pathway has a version of this as well. We talk a lot about learning in class and the notion of curricular and co-curricular learning. What about work-based learning? By the way, work-based learning and kind of co-op stuff, you can help with student financial stability as well as strengthening learning outside the classroom. I would actually argue, by the way, that the notion of co-curricular learning outside the classroom learning might be more important for your gen ed students than it is for the classic cohort-based CTE students, because it's farther from their connection to their career and their real world they're going to live in. If you're in Surge Tech, you may or may not need a Surge Tech internship or co-op experience, but if I'm in psychology, now maybe I want to know, A, how can I use psychology in the workplace if I'm not going to be a psych major, or if I'm going to try to be in psychology. That starts making meaning more to me because it's farther away from where you go. This one, I love this one. I started in 2002. We've been talking about this for 18 years, like the shift to portfolios. I don't know about you guys, the only place I've ever seen portfolios are in the performing arts, graphic design, those areas where it kind of lends itself to a display of your kind of skill set. By the way, great that it exists there. I hear every now and then the idea of more portfolios on the gen ed. I think Alverno is known for doing this. I don't know of a lot of community colleges that have gone a long way on this. I'm going to skip this one. This is important, but I'm going to skip it for now. All right. Any questions about those transitions for now? I'm going to show you now what some colleges around the country have done on this work so you can see the manifestation of how their experience for their student might be very different than for a current Lane student. Questions about those transitions, observations, things you're worried about?
It sounds really hard to do all.
Yes, it does.
Especially when you really get down to what do you mean? You know, it sounds great, but hard and could mean a lot of things.
All great at 38,000 feet, right? I'm in for the elevator pitch at 38,000 feet. What's this mean down on the ground? What's this mean for what I work on? Those are the real questions. How do we get this work done by us? Do we have a history of a kind of a work group structure that actually is designed to solve specific problems? The answer to all those questions largely historically is no. We have to do things differently, and it's not going to happen overnight. And this is a kind of cognitive dissonance thing, right? We are very comfortable with the systems we have preserving the kind of education system we've been using. Now we're talking about managing the student experience differently. We're going to probably need different structures to do that. That's scary too, right? And what is it? Here's the good news. There's anyone who thinks you're going to do this overnight doesn't really understand what all this is. You're going to have to prioritize. You're going to have to phase in certain approaches. My strong suggestion to colleges who to say, all right, we get it at 38,000 feet. Pick a fall term down the road, 2 or 3 years you want to work backwards from, where version 1.0 rolls out, and scale it that way. Because if you try to do this piecemeal, it's not going to add up to anything. And I do also think there's a big difference between how this work gets done in terms of the design process than maybe the way we've worked before. So it actually makes a lot of people nervous, and I think it should. It makes some people skeptical that the current colleges structures we've had can do this. And I think that's the question from leadership and from folks like me who go work with colleges is how do you kind of adjust the structure slightly, not reorg, that's not what we're talking about, but how do you get this work done where it's driven by the experts and practitioners on the ground, but is part of a larger tapestry? That's the art of this, right? Totally fair. And what does this mean on the ground is a very fair question. Anything else people were wondering about with all those transitions? Yeah. That was a big sigh, by the way. So for the cameras who didn't see it, big sigh before he started this.
I hesitate to say because you've been so well prepared that I'm expecting a big solid response. However, I think I've identified a gap. A gap
Great.
in all of this, which is at no point have you incorporated the impact of online instruction. And so when I throw in, what about online, it disrupts the narrative you're saying in many places.
Tell me how, by the way, this is something we've talked about, not here, but in many places about. So tell me give me the 2 or 3 things you're most interested in, like
Well,
online. How does online learning affect this, do you think?
Well, scheduling.
Yeah.
If I've got a sequence in social science, if all my core sequences in social science are online, then your scheduling problem is irrelevant.
That is true.
How do you embody the engagement of both faculty, advising, and students if more and more of the coursework and credit is via online instruction?
Yeah.
So it's just been absent from the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to decide what stuff we're going to talk about in any given 2-day period, but I'm happy to talk about both of these. We have to distinguish between online programs and offering online courses as a start, right? So I don't know Lane. I mean, I know Lane, but I don't know it very well. My guess is you have very few online programs where the entire program is online, right? That is a very different question. So let's shelve that. We can come back if we have time to talk about that question. There you're talking about something that's more like a for-profit institution or a cohort-based CTE program where you see the progression of courses. You've put them in an order already that students should take them, right? You've actually done a lot of guided pathways built into how you design that online program. Having said that, that's not what most colleges experience. Like, I don't know about your data at Lane, but I was at Foothill, which had a huge online program. We had something like 7% of our students who only took online courses. And if you looked at it closer, most of those were single course takers in the online, who were online only, who were actually at other institutions getting one course they needed online. By the way, that's a perfectly good service. I don't have any begrudge that service. So then the question comes back to the online, as we offer more and more online courses, I actually think that's absolutely a guided pathways problem. Because it asks the question, are we just going to offer a suite of courses that we hope students take? Like, what order do they take them in? Like, what courses are right to have online? Are they all right to have online? And then the second part of what you said, how do we develop faculty to kind of the teaching and learning side of this in an online course versus a face-to-face course? Right? I don't know where you are on your journey with that at Lane, but colleges go through evolutions on that stage. Usually we start offering things online. We realize we can get more enrollment with online courses. We offer more online courses. Someone asks about the quality of online courses. We say, yeah, you're right. We develop something to work on the quality of online courses. Like this is the evolution. And the question I would be asking from a guided pathway standpoint is, where does that online course fit in the optimal evolution of a student's program? What's different about critical thinking in an online course versus a face-to-face course? I don't know that we know what it looks like in a face-to-face course, but we actually still need to ask the question online. So I think it's a great lens with which to look at it. The scheduling thing, though, doesn't go away completely because in a program it goes away completely, but that doesn't describe many students. I would argue that a lot of your students are using your online courses because you haven't scheduled intentionally. They're taking courses because they couldn't get a full schedule, so now we have got 2 online courses. And I will bet if you look at the advisor's nodding her head, I won't say which one, but I would bet if you look at your online course taking and you then look at how many of those students on that online course is on path, you'll find that's a much lower rate than you will for other courses, because they're taking it in many cases because it's the only thing they could get. And it works with their schedule. And we also, by the way, have to talk about, here's an onboarding of students question, back to that. Like, if you are working full-time, this is why for-profit institutions struggle with outcomes. Because it looks easier, but it's actually not easier, it's harder to have the kind of ability to navigate an online course and fit it into your life. And so students often take those thinking it's just gonna fit, it'll work, I can do it. And especially given that many of your students are taking face-to-face courses, online courses, and working, man, that's a powerful troika to try to navigate. So I do think it's a lot of guided pathways related questions in here. I think we have to be clear. I mean, look at your data. I don't know the answer to this. My guess is if you look at students who only take courses online, very few of them will be programs. You'll have a couple who'll take 1 or 2 courses. So most of those online course takers are face-to-face students too. So now the question is, why are they taking courses online? Start investigating that. I think there are a series of guided pathways framed questions in there. And then there's the teaching and learning question, which I absolutely think you should ask. Like, what do we need to do differently in an online course? I don't know where you guys, you probably have some, maybe you have some development around that already. How does teaching and learning in an online course need to evolve to support a program mentality? Wow, that's interesting. Maybe you have a different ability because you're already working in chat windows with students or you're working in asynchronous ways to help reinforce program progress in an online course more than you do in a face-to-face. I don't know. Maybe that's, I mean, these are all things you could throw into the mix. So thanks for bringing it up. I mean, I think it's an interesting set of questions. I would have us self-reflect on why we have so many online courses and what role we thought they were playing and what the role that we actually, when we look at the data, they're playing for students every day. So great set of questions. Other ones, any questions? I can go to the examples now. We can ask questions as you go. Let's do that. I don't want to lose time when we get to some of the examples. All right, so this is my caveat for the next set of slides. And that is, it is very easy when you look at this next set of slides and go, man, I wish our website looked like that. Like, this is website, gosh, our freaking website sucks. By the way, every college thinks their website sucks. And I, by the way, I don't know if the web designer person is here. I feel for her or him, right here. Yeah. Because it's not his fault, because he's trying to model the chaos in all of your processes. It doesn't get better when you put it online. If you've got chaotic processes, he can't magically make them work online, right? He's not a magician, right? In fact, is this helping you at all? Maybe you are a magician, I don't know. On the side. You're what? On the side. On the side, the magician? Yeah. I mean, if you've got chaotic processes and you've got like 800 programs, it doesn't get better when he puts them on your website, right? So this idea of kind of, you know, business process, I know business process re-engineering is like, business stuff. But a lot of this structure and culture stuff we have to work on first. So you're going to see cool things. They're 5% web design and 95% structure and process changes that are now reflected on the website. I don't even love all of these. I mean, having lived in that world for 6 years or 4 or 5 years at the end of the 90s, there's some navigation functionality, three-click type rules that I think are still violated, but I at least like the kind of information architecture use cases. Like, they understand why their students are coming to the website. So yes, they're kind of good. I wouldn't say they're perfect. And this is, of course, the real point. This is what you're seeing as a reflection of scaled organizational guided pathways redesign on websites, right? So that's how I start my kind of early work. So we're going to do some college-focused versions first, and then I'm going to go back to the pillars and show you examples. So here's Sinclair in Ohio. Completion by Design College, Dayton, Ohio. Not a very economically well-off area as a whole. Very blue-collar, high diversity. Here's an idea. So I come to the institution. I didn't go to Lane's homepage. Sometimes I will do this. This is what you see when you come to their institution. They talk right up front about what they call meta majors career communities. So rather than say, come to us or here's how you apply, they say, here's kind of why are we going to focus on career communities? What are our career communities? Here's our 6 career communities. I come to this and I see, oh, you want me to explore and connect with my career goals. Hey, you want me to meet students with similar interests? That's kind of cool. I'm going to engage with faculty members and employers in my career area. I'm going to consult with an advisor who specializes in my programs. That all sounds pretty cool so far. And I can understand the resources in Sinclair. That's right up front. Here's why you should care about this student. Secondly, here's our 6 career communities. We've got business IT, creative arts, health science, liberal arts and social sciences, public safety and justice, and STEM. All right, so if I was to click on one of those, Here's, I can browse the programs under the business IT career community. This is where I think it's a little too listy still for me. I'd like to see an intermediate navigation here that doesn't just list all the programs. But if I click on a program, here's business administration, I'm already seeing the kind of, like the guided pathways courses to take. It's got program outcomes, it's got transfer information, it's got map options, it's got links to course syllabi and schedules. It's all right there for me as a student. I see where you want me to go with this. Sinclair also has this recipe for student success. All right, I love the idea of talking to our new students about onboard. Here's your job when we onboard you. We're going to decide on a major. We're going to get you help if you need to do this. You're going to build an academic plan. You're going to complete college-level math and English in the first year, take 9 credits in your program and study in the first year, and attempt 30 credit hours. And that's, I mean, not everyone's going to do this, of course, but they're saying up front, here's how you succeed here. By the way, that's all got evidence behind it. You know, if you do those things, you have a much better chance of succeeding. I also love, by the way, they say it's not only 15-15. Maybe you get there by 12-12 and 6. Take 6 in the summer. So this is kind of an early kind of, and by the way, I love this. If you do this, 58% of you will graduate in 3 years. That's a college with an overall completion rate, by the way, that's still in the low 20s. They're in a process, but like, I love the idea that if you do these 5 things, 58% of you will actually graduate within 3 years. Here's their career connection stuff. They've got this really kind of, use the career connection to explore, to plan, to gain, to finish. Talking about steps in each of these. I like where they've gone with this. Lorain County. Here's what you see when you come to Lorain County Community College, also in Ohio. Pick programs and careers. By the way, I love the simplicity of this landing page here. Just kind of 4 things here. Am I here to apply and register, to transfer, programs and careers, paying for college? Here's programs, careers. We're going to talk about our program and career pathways. That's their version of meta majors. They're explaining it. They're saying you can explore the pathway. Here's the other ones. They're at Lorain. Very clear and upfront. It's not a list of 150 programs. It's a list of, it's probably too many, 10 of these meta major pathways. Actually, these are the guys who, Lorain, before I got there, they had picked 17 different meta majors. I'm like, I think you're kind of missing the point here. You want to get down to a smaller number. They got it down to 10, which I guess is good enough for them. Here's the business and entrepreneurship pathway. So it lists the programs under this. You've got kind of stuff up there about what that means. If you pick accounting, it brings up the accounting page. Now I see the short-term certificates. I see the associate degrees. I see what I can do with this. This talks about career opportunities. University partnerships. I get down to so I want to take the associate degree. I got jobs and salary, curriculum guides, course descriptions. And then I've got the kind of information right there about all the jobs in the area. It's linked into the kind of career information in the area, which is through Career Coach. I like that. I like the curriculum guide. Here's the default curriculum guide. You're going to come in and make a program plan based on this, but here you can see where we think you should go. And by kind of first year, fall semester, spring, fall, spring. You've got kind of stuff down here about university partnerships. You've got electives down here. Hey, how about transferring credits? That sounds good. Here's a program we have with Hiram College, which is, I think, in Cleveland, or maybe just outside Cleveland, which is a 2+2 in our Bachelor's of Arts in Accounting and a 2-year degree. And they actually can tell you what classes you take here at the college and how you get into that program. Jackson College in Michigan. Again, here's their career kind of programs of study page. You land, they've got business, community, technology, health science, human services. Here's the kind of whole page here. I like the visual here, by the way, to make it real for students. They're kind of getting a sense of what's behind this. I have some videos I can show you on how other colleges have put this in front of students. But if you pick human services, cool, here's the human services pathway. It's got kind of the program starting to list down here. If I pick one of those programs, let's say I pick social work, learn more about that. All right, cool, here's the social work page. What are my transfer options? Cool, here's the transfer option. We got a program with Eastern Michigan University. Here's the articulation agreement. Here's the kind of admissions process. Here's your gen ed and kind of requirements. So they're kind of getting everyone, here's a sample course map for you. So it's all kind of like there for students to see. I also love this, by the way. This is a new student orientation checklist for people running new student orientations on. This is a student-facing checklist of the things they ask every student to help guide them through the process. It's things like, do you intend to transfer after your time here at Jackson? They have dorms. Do you plan to live on campus? Do you still live at the address we have in Colleague? Do you plan to use financial aid? So this is like a checklist that feeds into their services so students don't have to go find them. They'll get contacted. Just filling out this simple checklist in new student orientation. This is more about their kind of career pathway stuff. Is this career path for you? Here are the career categories. Here are the courses you're going to take. Here's sample careers. So they're bringing in that career side earlier. And so those are kind of 3 college level examples real quickly there. And now I want to do it by pillar. I want to come back to the pillars and look at some other. We talked about these already, but I want to give you some examples. All right. Here's what it looks like at most colleges before you start here, right? This is the pre. This look like yours at all? Here's the list of your programs, right? And I don't know about you, but there's not a human being who looks at this and goes, well, I see what to do. I got a choice architecture. Like, I'm just looking at this, and I see, now I can explore on this. It's a way to explore, but it's not helping people make a choice. So that, I think, is the old version at one of the colleges. Here's the new version. I come to Indian River State College in Florida. I land at this page. I see the 8 areas of interest. They have to call them meta majors in Florida because of policy. I see the 8 areas. I get a kind of an idea of what's going on here. If I click on STEM, here are the programs in STEM. All those programs, by the way, are still there. But now we're kind of taking a 2-step process to show you how to get there. All right, now I see there's AA degrees, there's AS. I would love that they actually told people the difference between what it means to get an AA degree and an AS degree, which I think I didn't know till 7 years of being in higher education, that there was a big difference between having a BA or a BS or an MA or an MS. Like, what were the differences? Why that might matter down the road somewhere. Here's kind of, if you take information technology and cybersecurity, here's your kind of pathway to finish this. This, by the way, is interesting. This is a program that actually has 74 credit hours. Because apparently for that particular program in IT management and cybersecurity, if you combine those together, you can't finish in 60. They're at least telling students that up front. Right? All right, it's going to take 74. And I know you have state level policy kind of working on this here. But here's your path for getting through. You can go and find out information about salary, about wages in the area to learn more about what's going on there. Here's another example, St. Petersburg in Florida. I think they call this their wheel. What I think is interesting about this is I think this is clearly a way to de-emphasize social sciences and humanities. Arts, humanities, and design and social sciences are upside down. Just saying, maybe someone made that choice. I mean, so STEM though. So this is kind of cool. It's a lot of information. I'm not sure I love the visual on this. I think it's kind of cool in the aggregate. It's hard to read. But it's got kind of what are the sample careers, what are the salaries. It's got kind of earnings of certificates, AS degrees, BA degrees. Here's technology at St. Petersburg, like listing the kind of degrees and certificates. And here's the way they do pathways. They're interesting, by the way, because they decided not to go to the individual kind of course by course, term by term only. What this is actually in that computer networking program or a different one, a list of the courses we would like you in the ideal world to take in this order. So if you're part-time, you can take them in a different order. Maybe I only take 2 of these or 3 of these. If you have dual credit or you transfer in units, you can check those off the list. The one thing I'll say about this, and one of the reasons it works at St. Petersburg that it might not work at Lane, is because you have quarters and you don't offer all the courses every quarter. Right, that idea that was one scheduling thing that we didn't talk about is like, where does a course land if I offer this only in the winter and you don't take it in the winter, then I got to wait till the next winter to take that course. They don't have that problem as much because they're a 60,000 student institution where there's a lot of every course being offered every semester. They still, though, even with that, this is their relationship with the University of South Florida. By the way, this is kind of cool. Here are the courses you take at St. Petersburg College in year 1 and 2. Here are the courses you take at USF in years 3 and 4. All laid out for you so you know what the real 2+2 is. It's co-branded, by the way, right? This is USF and SPC working together. These students know they're in a USF program at SPC, but they've got a clear path to what you take where, and it's very kind of lockstep of knowing how you're going to move through that program. I love this visual. It's like the Candyland visual of how you move through the institution. What's cool about this is it's not only the courses in engineering, technology, AS in order, but over here has outside the course stuff we'd like you to do this semester. You can't read this, but it says, actually I can't read it either. by the way, you'll get all these slides as a leave behind so you can look a little closer. Choose career, discover careers in research. Start a human resource. That can't be what that says. That sounds like, let's just start a human resource. It doesn't say that. Modify my learning plan if necessary. Make an advising appointment. Visit career services to discuss work-based learning opportunities. What do you need to know at each stage of your journey? Right? Over here is something about verify transfer institution. So they're just helping you see how you get from point A to point B. What do you need to do inside the classroom? What do you need to do outside the classroom? I love that as an example. Here's Macomb in Michigan. Here's their kind of areas of interest, communities, career communities, meta majors. You pick one of these, it's still got all the programs. Pick the biological sciences program, you get to the same career opportunities, employment outlook. All of these are different examples of how do you get to learning more information about programs, the kind of career options story there as well. Northeast Wisconsin, another version of this. You guys are kind of getting redundant at this point. By the way, this is kind of cool. The math team at San Jacinto College in Florida, San Jacinto in Houston, was dealing with the problem of, I don't know that everyone's going to know what actually is the right math course for their pathway. So they created a survey for the program people about what are the types of math skills your graduates need. And at the end of this, it spits out what's the right math course. Transferable level math course. That's kind of cool for like an internal thing. What's the right math course for psychology? Well, what kind of skills do you need? Do you need to apply logic and reasoning? Do you need to apply the theory of functions? Do you need to create and interpret graph? I mean, they just have different, this is going to get you to one of three choices, by the way. Quantitative reasoning, statistics, or algebra. Kind of a cool internal feature of how you work with a problem of what's the right math course. Questions about those? Those are all kind of clarifying the path. So about the programs, about the meta majors. What are some things you wonder or you liked in that or you're concerned about? Over here, yes.
So when I'm thinking about students first time in college, oh, thank you. So I don't have to shout also. So students that are first time in college and they have a dream or an expectation from parents to be on a particular path, say STEM, say pre-med.
Say pre-nursing.
Right. How do we communicate to those students that there are, well, I think we're communicating that there are multiple paths, but how are we communicating and actually executing other options for those students? That there are many students who think that they want to do this or that was their dream, and then we want to still support them in pursuing another option.
Yeah, so great question. Thank you for a couple things with it. And by the way, there's a lot to unpack in there. First, I would say one thing we have to do with all entering new students is broaden their horizons and broaden their possibilities. Because if we don't, we're going to reify intergenerational poverty accidentally, right? By the students who are coming from underprepared, underrepresented backgrounds being told you can only go to low-wage jobs, or they only know low-wage jobs, or they know nursing and low-wage jobs. They don't know the full range, right? So we have to own that and say, hey, yeah, we've got 150 programs. They're all open to you. Our only programs are not nursing and business, right? Because what are the two they know about? Nursing and business, right? So that idea of bringing career exploration earlier and maybe teaching a course that's mandatory to say, what are the things you like doing? How does that match to careers that are out there? How does that match to our programs? That's not, first of all, that's not going to happen without our being intentional about it. And B, if we don't do that, they do default to either what their friends said or their parents said. And I think there's a lot of problems with that for a number of reasons, but one of them is an equity reason, right, of not unintentionally tracking people into low-wage programs, of opening horizons rather than closing them. There's a second part of that question is, what do we do when people start down a path and then have a lack of success on that path? And that's a pillar 3 question. It's actually my favorite pillar 3 question, which is, what do you do with students who if you looked at them new, are never getting into your nursing program, but have been taking A&P for the 3rd time, algebra for the 2nd time? And I guarantee you, no advisor at this college has ever said, Jennifer, I see that you're pre-nursing here at Lane. You're 8 quarters in and you have a 2.1 GPA and haven't passed algebra. Keep going, you'll get into nursing, don't worry about it. Because that would be morally bankrupt, right? But there's a second question here, which is how much less morally bankrupt is it to know that I bet at Lane right now with 10,000 students, 600 to 800 fit that profile. And unless they wander into her office or someone's office on the kind of counseling or advising side, they're invisible and they're taking courses thinking they're getting into the nursing program and they're not. So there's two levels to that question. How do we open doors and give people the support to get to maybe places they did not dream before, which we absolutely should do. And then second would be how do we match their interest to programs to careers? We have to do that. We can't let that happen by osmosis. Third is, in kind of keeping them on the path, how do we intervene in customized ways? So if we actually, by the way, you could run that list. I know of a college in Ohio who did this. They actually created this list of students who had lower than a 2.3 GPA who were clearly pre-nursing. They had a couple hundred students on that list. They put a hold on their registration. Said, you can't re-register until you come talk to us. And when they came in, they told them, Jennifer, I'm sorry. I see you have a 2.25 GPA. I know you have this dream of nursing. It's never going to happen here at Lane Community College. Now, that sounds scary. That sounds like you're going to have students crying in your office, you're ruining my dreams, because that's exactly what happens. But there's a question here. The college who did this in Ohio said, yeah, I get that. But if we don't do this, we are taking their money, we are falsifying their hopes, and by the way, they are running out of financial aid. And from a debt standpoint, remember the number I showed you this morning, if you're a non-completer, right, especially if you then go to a for-profit and are a non-completer, what happens? You're in maybe worse off financial shape than you were when you started. So I think that's a third pillar question. So there's a first two pillars question. The clarify the path question, I think it's actually more in here about getting students on the path. How do we help them explore careers, open their eyes, help them match interest to careers? And then there's a pillar three version of that as well. Yes, please.
So you both sat in on my current life planning class, and I hope you would agree that you saw over those 10 weeks exactly what happened, right? Students opened up their eyes, new possibilities, got clear about their goals, right? Confidence. The challenge is, how do we scale that up to all incoming students, right? Instead of just the 60 that take the class every term. And I think that's why we've been talking about, and you've been hearing about, wondering about an upfront required first-year experience class that all students take where they all can get that kind of intervention and exploration. And that's a huge
Maybe
thing
customized by area of interest.
Yes, although interestingly enough, at the conference that Nicole and Jill, another colleague, and I went to on guided pathways, first-year experience, and career exploration, the message from the national leader who came and spoke and from other colleges was, don't do that. Keep your if you do that, don't do it by career, community, or meta major. Why? Because you want all those students to open their eyes to all the different possibilities. You want them to be able to explore all of those options with the ideal that at the end of that class, students would have at the very least chosen a pathway. And then the other reason they suggested not do that, besides the career exploration component, was it's a logistical nightmare to try to schedule, to try to guess how many sections of this do we need for health and medical, how many sections of this do we need. But the real reason was to give students the opportunity in that class to be exposed to all the different possibilities.
I know who presented that to you. And there is,
sure
by the way, there is a debate on that issue, let me just say. There are two sides to that issue, and it depends on which problem you think is the biggest one to try to solve. I think which direction. By the way, I don't think one's right, one's wrong. I also think you have to consider whether these are 1 unit, 2 unit, or 3 unit courses. What you can achieve in a 3 unit course doing that is very different than what you can achieve in a 1 unit course. I don't disagree with anything you said, by the way, but because to me, at the end of the day, the biggest problem to try to solve here is to get students to do that interest exploration, exploring careers, matching to programs. However you do that, to make sure that everyone get it, let's get there first, figure out the optimal way later. The scheduling thing is, on one hand, a red herring, and one hand, very real. The scheduling thing is, at colleges who haven't taken on the bigger scheduling issue, that is true. At colleges who are thinking about the bigger scheduling issues, it's not as big of a problem. Having said that, it's still a big problem in a lot of places. So I think this is, I think, a great conversation about this issue. I will tell you that 23 of the 30 colleges on that National Pathways Project, the AHC Pathways Project, either evolved or started a mandatory first semester course that's primarily focused on this topic. I actually personally don't think there's a way to do this very well or deeply without a mandatory course. Because I just don't know how advisors are going to do this offline in 20 or 30 minutes, or students are going to go do this on their own. Like, I do think, I don't know what the answer is, and said person will tell you it's a 3-unit course versus 2 versus 1, which I don't doubt. I mean, where you're trying to weigh various things here. I don't know what the answer is to that. I do know, even in a 1-unit course, I'll take 10 hours over 0, right? My guess is 30 is better than 10, right? But it's not that simple. The question, the logistics get harder with the scheduling. So what I love is that there are a range of colleges wrestling with this in different ways. And, you know, I love the way you framed that. That is, how do we get more students to experience this, right? To have this kind of better sense earlier of where they want to go. So that's great.
The other thing that people just might be interested in, the reason that we started calling these groupings or clusters of majors that we started doing, 2 or 3 years ago, the reason we actually are calling them career communities is we stole that name from Sinclair Community College.
It's like a Mad Libs, right? There's only 9 words that people rearrange into various orders, right? Insert verb here. Like focus areas, career communities, career and academic. You pick your, whatever it is. Like some people don't like career being in, I actually like career being in there. You get to the colleges where they're called focus areas. I think I told some of you earlier, my favorite one from California, trailheads. That's kind of cool, right? The idea of you're going to get on a path and what's the trailhead that gives you the choice of choosing from different paths. So whatever it is, it's how do you make that real so it's not just an archetype of a structure? How does that become a real learning community? This is why I was going to show you this one. This is Valencia College, first winner of the Aspen Prize. These are their student learning outcomes for their new student experience program. Not just this course, but the entire onboarding process is they want students to have the 6 Ps at the end of their onboarding process. They're going to have purpose, they're going to have a pathway, they're going to have a plan, they're going to have preparation, personal connection, and they're going to have a place. I love that. It's kind of a mix of the cognitive and non-cognitive. And I love that they put a stake in the ground. What are the outcomes for our onboarding process? Then you can measure these, right? You can measure over time. Are we getting better at this? Where are we falling short? Maybe we're falling short on personal connection. All of the research on low-income students and students from underrepresented backgrounds suggests that that's one of the most important things you can do is establish a personal connection. Because many of those students don't have the social capital to navigate institutions. They don't have someone that if something goes wrong to talk to, right? It's not their fault. It's not their family's fault. Like we make a lot of broad statements about cultures and their views of higher education, which I've found in my experience to be completely false. Right? The communities of color don't value higher education as much. In my experience, communities of color who have lived in poverty for a long time value higher education more because they know it's the only way out of poverty. So we got to look at some of the assumptions we're making about a lot of these things. And I love the way they've put out there about here's what we're shooting for in our onboarding experience. That's pretty cool. Now you can work backwards from it. I want to leave more time for questions. I have other examples you can look at in here. Advising, we talk a lot about this notion of are we going to use navigators or coaches or professional advisors? There's all kinds of examples out there, colleges doing different things. Alamo in Texas, man, this thing is far too detailed for a guy in a Hawaiian shirt. But like they've like layered it out to what's the type of advising that happens pre-college to 0 hours. Here's the things we do. 0 to 30 hours, entry to college success, here's the things we're focusing on. Here's the way we're going to make sure students are successful. And then 31 plus, progress and completion. Here's the things we're going to do in the second year to graduation. I love the way they've laid this out as part of the student experience. I mean, it's a little from a visual standpoint, but it's putting it in front of, here's what we're going to do. I love, just back to this, here's what we're going to do now before they're enrolled. Here are the things we're going to try to work on. We've got our Alamo enrollment guidance. We've got the institutes, which is their version of meta majors. Early college academies, dual credit, connection. Here's what we do. Grad Guru is one of their tech software. Actions, we assign an advisor. Like this is the step up front of advising. Here it is for 0 to 30 hours. I think after this is one more example. Here's Indian River's checkpoint advising manual. Every time they meet with a student, here are the things they want to make sure every advisor runs through. I think that's cool. This is crazy here. This is way too formalistic for me, but this is St. Petersburg in Florida. They've got like flow charts of the whole process, and they've like at each stage, this is kind of the typical onboarding path for a degree-seeking student at St. Petersburg, from prospect to applicant to enrollee, and each of these has its own subroutine, by the way. Here's the advising visit flow. I mean, this is great. They've mapped. I love that they went this deep on it. I'm not sure I would have gone this deep on it, but they definitely did this. If this is, by the way, the green, yellow, red here is in the advising visit, community and program is their meta major. If you've got someone who really knows and you confirm that this is what they want to do, here's what we do. If they're uncertain, here's what we're going to do. And if they have no idea, here's what we're going to do. I love the way they're basing it in the student experience. Students are at different places. What do we do differently if we know students are at different places? Here, I mean, maybe a little formalistic. Here's what we do differently. Current student onboarding. They like flow charted the whole thing. We gave them an assignment on the national project to whiteboard your current student experience. They went nuts on this to 9 yards and did this at every step of the process. I mean, so it's really cool to see them. If they want to change their career community, here's the process that it like brings forward. So some advising redesign features about personal context early on, case management, connection with faculties and other in their field of interest. Right? We're going to have to work on both of these at the same time. All right. So what I'm going to do is tell you there are 2 papers called Guided Pathways Demystified that I wrote that took the top 20 questions practitioners like you asked about to the Guided Pathways field over the last 5 or 6 years. The first paper are 10 theoretical-based questions. The second paper are more operational-based questions, and I kind of explored them in this blog post series that we turned into these papers. And the questions, they're not designed for me to like convince you should do Guided Pathways. These are great questions. It's questions like, by the way, don't worry about any of that. These are an example of some of the first 5 questions. Won't we sacrifice quality when we move to Guided Pathways? I love these questions. We should be talking about this, right? These are, I tell leaders, by the way, if you're not hearing these questions, it means no one believes you're actually going to do anything. Because you're going to hear versions of these questions. What about free choice? What about the heart of liberal arts education? You guys had a whole session on this today because you guys realize this is important. Don't we lose control over what's taught in the discipline? These are great questions. Let's explore them together. What about losing enrollment, hand-holding, wandering and finding themselves, careers? These are great questions. If you go to this paper, by the way, it's free. It's available. You'll see about a page exploring this with my thoughts. I've heard the best way people use this is to actually put this into department meetings and like brown bags, and actually you explore these together. What is it about the current experience we don't like on these topics? What is it we might design in a Guided Pathways mentality? By the way, the more opposite, I love this one. Isn't Guided Pathways just the next educational fad? To preview my answer to this one is, I love the people who ask this is because for 25 years they've been right every other time. Right? They've been 100% right to just wait out whatever it is you're talking about today, because tomorrow you'll be talking about something different. You might guess where I go with that, which is we have to stick with this over time. You can't do this as a one-off. Other questions here. God, I think I fixed that. About equity, part-time students, math and English. What about changing their minds? These are all things that have come up in some of the breakout sessions and will more tomorrow. But know that there's also, if on later time periods you want to take a look at this, there's a paper that kind of explores them with you. You can pick out pieces of it, the pieces you're interested in. But what are 1 or 2 other, we got a couple minutes left, and look, it's almost happy hour, and I've been going since 8:15. I'm not going over today. I will guarantee you that. I'm going to see some of you tomorrow anyway. That is not happening. What are 1 or 2 things? What are you still like concerned about or worried about or excited about in the last couple of minutes here? Some of you have been with me all day. Man, you guys deserve a medal for that. Yes, sir, right here.
So I'm from the library, and
cool.
I just wanted to know how have other colleges, the library, been supportive or been integrated into the Guided Pathways process?
I think there's 2 main areas that has happened. One is on the teaching and learning front. Like when we talk about how do we strengthen teaching and learning, like the support of the library in terms of supporting faculty and students in achieving learning outcomes in courses. But there's a second place I think the library is helpful, is in kind of the navigation of students like exploring careers and programs. I think the libraries can be very helpful there. I've heard of a couple library programs being involved at that level. Sometimes being built into first semester experience type courses. Like you gotta be careful about the first semester experience, or first in your case, quarter experience courses, that they don't become like you're trying to solve 8 million problems at once. Having said that, having the notion of library being part of orientation, or the library being part of the onboarding to the college, I think those are places you can see from a Guided Pathways mindset. If you're going to ask the question, what do students need to know when, I think there are answers from the library that are going to be relevant to that kind of progression over time. And I do think on the teaching and learning front also, that building into how do we strengthen that over time. I mean, I think the library often has, kind of resources to help with this issues of what does critical thinking look like, problem solving. I mean, research is a problem-solving exercise, right? How do we take ownership over that? How does the library work with faculty to help develop that in students? I think those are all places that can be involved here. One more. Let's do one more. You get to see me tomorrow anyway, so let's do one last. Oh, over here. Thank you. Ask me the hardest one as everyone walks out. Drop the mic, and we'll just kind of move on.
So I know a lot of the work is focused on like the 15 to finish movement, for example, helping students to figure out what is that optimal credit load. Have you seen schools put together a program that really helps students make a good decision there?
Yeah, so this 15 to finish thing is one of my other national organizations, Complete College America, is really good at like pithy phrases that cover things that sometimes obscure the depth of the challenge of exploring an issue. Like I think in some ways, I mean, these guys are policy people. They know that you have to have something short to keep the mind of legislators and policy people. 15 to finish, I love the idea. I mean, look, you don't get to 45 units in an academic year at a quarter system by multiplying 12 times 3. Right, so that, I mean, I get that, right? So, and by the way, there's not a whole lot of evidence. A lot of the times we go down the path of, well, students aren't successful if they take more units. So two things there, right? We make the assumption sometimes about who of the students we think aren't going to be successful that I worry about from an equity and an institutional racism standpoint. And B, I'm a data guy. I'll tell you who was the most successful group at my college back at Foothill was those taking 18 or more units. Now that may not be an apples to apples comparison because they're obviously highly motivated, many of them are in cohort-based CT, but let's not assume it's the units. It's the intersection between unit loads and life. And so I think I don't think there's an optimal answer to that question. I think it's interesting, one of the ones you saw up there was that college that said you can get to 32 different ways, 15 or 15, or 12, 12, and 6. I mean, you can't do this on quarters as much, but intercession ideas with semesters, like you could go 12, 3, 12, 10, 3, 10, 3. Like there's all kinds of ways to figure that out. I think at the end of the day, every student's gonna be on an individualized plan, and you're trying to optimize how to get them through in efficient ways that are recognizing what their outside kind of life constraints are with family and work. What I wouldn't lose in that is the assumption that through increasing their understanding of what the value proposition is at the college, they might be more willing to take more courses, right? So you can tell them what does it get you to take 9 versus 6 or 12 versus 9, or how long it's gonna take, or if we make sure they're the right courses, how you're gonna get through and be a junior at U of O more quickly, you're gonna get into the workplace. So I think you do, this is an area I think over time, I love the 15 to finish stuff when I heard it at the start because of the math side of it. I don't want to go too far to the other way and not push students to take more units because I think we have learned that it does breed success. And in the back of my head, I always have that economic argument of the longer it takes, the less likely A, they're going to finish, and B, they don't regain that time in the marketplace. But I don't think it's automatic that you can take and say 15 is the perfect number. We had an interesting discussion, I don't remember what session this was in, about colleges, I mean universities, by the way, usually tuition's the same whether you take 12, 15, or 18 units. Community colleges, we don't do that, largely because we have had a lot of part-timers. There's an interesting question about the finance model, and there's a couple colleges who've done this, where you go to say, you pay the same for 12, 15, or 18, and now from a fiscal standpoint, looking at your leaders, like you have to see how many students would go from 9 to 12, or 12 to 15 without, like you would really have to know your population well to do that. Some of the people brought it up as an idea for maybe taking some of those exploratory courses that don't count for transfer. Well, if you're not paying above 12 units, maybe it's possible to do that, right? Because Pell, in that situation, wouldn't be covering those extra courses. Lot on the table here. I'm not sure there's an easy answer to the question, but I do think, A, students need to take more units if they can. B, they need to take the right units. C, they need to understand the value proposition. And D, there's no magic one answer. But I do think the focus on that individual plan at the end of the day is going to help you kind of answer that question over time. I don't want to take any more of your time, and I'm sure you guys are tired of listening to me at this point, but thank you. There's a lot behind this, right? I'll give you all these slides. Some of you have topic sessions tomorrow. This is a long-term process. This is not something you can take in. Even with being here all day, it's still a fire hose. Like there's a lot, like if I'm with this gentleman down here, there's a lot between your 38,000-foot pitch of guided pathways and what it looks like on the ground. At the end of the day, that's not me. Like that's all what you guys make of it and where you choose to go first. Certainly happy to help over time if that's what you guys are interested in. But there's not one answer to this. Every college has their own journey with it. So thank you for your energy. Thankful for your thoughtfulness. At the end of the day, go back to where we started. You guys believe you have agency. in changing the conditions why more students don't complete. And by working on that, you're going to be working on social justice and equity, and if you are able to improve your completion rate by 20 points, those aren't points, those are students. And disproportionately, those students will be low-income students and students of color in your community. You have a lot of lives kind of in the balance here. It both puts a weight on what we do and an urgency, but the good news is that you've seen from those other colleges, there's a place you can get to so more of them are completing. Keep that with you as you go through this over time and you wrestle with your place in this versus the entire movement. Keep with you those social justice, equity, and agency issues. And I thank you for your time today very much.